Well, what's up in there, guys? Brian here, the 3 topics game here to share with you one of my top 5 list videos to share with you guys today. This is acting as the second part in a 3-part series where I go over some of the best duels that I've seen over the original Yu-Gi-Oh anime series. Now, in the first part, I went over what I thought were the top 5 best duels that Mr. Joey Wheeler took part in. For this particular video, I'll be going over the top 5 best duels that I believe that my all-time favorite duelist in the form of Seto Kaiba, Master of the Blue Eyes, took part in. Now, as I stated earlier, just a few moments ago, Seto Kaiba is my favorite duelist of all time, and he is awesome ever since the very first episode, and his Blue Eyes also just happens to be my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh card of all time. So, as you can see, this list was a little bit harder than the other two to put together, just simply because as my favorite duelist, I try not to be too biased. However, he has had his set of victories and a number of key defeats that have really shaped him as an overall character. And I just think he is just an amazing dynamic as a character. So if you happen to enjoy this little ranking of mine, if you do happen to enjoy it by the end, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep track of me in all my future videos. So without wasting any more time, let's start off with what I believe to be the 5th best duel that Mr. Seto Kaiba took part in.
Taking the number 5 spot, we'll have to go to the Champion vs. Creator duel from Season 1, as Kaiba challenged Maximilian Pegasus in order to recover his brother's soul. Now, not counting the little testing match that Pegasus had with Yugi at the beginning of the season, or the flashback with Bandit Keith, this was really the first time we actually got to see Pegasus in action during a real duel, and it didn't disappoint. Despite everything Kaiba had done to get to this point, this duel proved that even a top-tier duelist like himself couldn't really stand up against Pegasus alone. With Pegasus using his Millennium Eye, he was very successful in getting an early lead and even taking possession of Kaiba's first Blue Eyes White Dragon and debuting the Toon monsters for the very first time. But despite Kaiba fighting at such a serious disadvantage, he was able to get a number of good turns in and was even successful in catching Pegasus off guard a couple of times and even being able to destroy the Toon Blue Eyes White Dragon. But ultimately his efforts would fall short, and Pegasus using Kaiba's own Crush card trap against him would be the death move that sealed Kaiba's defeat. But even in a loss, Kaiba really did perform the best he could given the circumstances, and certainly lasted far longer than most opponents would against Pegasus at this point in the series, which is why this duel takes the number 5 spot on my list. Taking the number 4 spot, we'll have to go to Seto's duel against his stepfather Gozobaro during the first arc of Season 3. Now, since the first half of Season 3 focused on Seto's backstory, having him duel against his stepfather, knowing that this was not only the man that adopted him and his little brother, but this is the man that he stole his company from, it seemed kind of fitting for this arc. It was also during this duel that we were shown the debut of Exodia Necros, which at the time was something I was quite curious about, so to see it in action was an added bonus. And given Seto's own painful history with Exodia, this matchup felt kind of personal, going all the way back to the very first episode of Season 1. We get to see some solid back and forth action between the two Kaibas, but as we've seen so many times before this duel, Seto's brilliance shines through, as he was able to find out the ultimate weakness of Exodia Necros, and using a couple of key cards was able to make Exodia vulnerable, allowing his Blue Eyes White Dragon to deliver the final blow, and by doing so, not only won this duel, but allowed the Blue Eyes to get its revenge against Exodia, which to me, I think is actually one of the more solid duels that actually took place in the first half of the 3rd arc, which helps this duel take the number 4 spot on my list. Taking the bronze medal on this list, we'll have to go to the second duel between Kaiba and Aster in Season 4. Now, I've said this before, that Season 4 probably had the strongest collection of antagonist henchmen, and I stand by that statement, as not only was Aster successful in catching Kaiba off guard in their first duel and ending it in a draw, but it was actually during their second duel taking place literally on top of a moving plane, which created one of the most intense dueling locations I've ever seen. And even Seto's little brother Mokuba actually had to be active and get control of the plane before it crashed into a mountain, which added a level of suspense. Now, the duel itself was very entertaining, and it was not so one-sided as their first duel played out. We even got to learn a bit about Aster's past and his reasons for why he hated Kaiba so much, which made this battle feel a bit personal for the both of them. But in the end, Kaiba was able to pull out some pretty cool counters to help him take control of this duel, and even managed to summon a pretty cool fusion in the form of the Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon, which I would like to point out was only just recently released in the TCG earlier this year. So the fact that it took this card over 15 years to finally come out in the real game actually says something to me. And with this duel having such high stakes for not only the duelists' souls but their lives as well, it helps grant it itself a very strong spot on my list. The second best duel that Kaiba ever took part in, to me, is going to surprise a lot of people because it just so happens to be my favorite duel of all time, and that goes to the third duel between Kaiba and Yugi during the Battle City Semifinals. Now, this duel was a long time coming and was very much hyped up since the very beginning of Season 2, and the one duel that Kaiba was looking forward to the most, and it did not disappoint for a single moment. This is perhaps the most intensely even matchup duel in the entire run of the Duel Monsters era, as these two duels show off why their rivalry is still legendary till this day. This was also the very first time we ever actually got to see two Egyptian god cards go head to head, and what was probably the longest exchange of effective countering between two duelists I've ever seen, which showed off just how strong these two duelists are and their ability to adapt to each other's tactics. The only thing I don't like about this duel is that there were a few key moves that happened late in the duel that have the writers completely manipulate the use of certain key cards to allow Yugi to win. Now look, I understand that Yugi is the main character of the anime and that he had to win, but I felt that there were plenty of ways that you could have him win this duel and outsmart Kaiba without Kaiba looking stupid for making some mistakes like not knowing the proper use of certain cards, which is the one thing that a brilliant duelist like Kaiba would make sure he doesn't do. But despite this issue, it still remains my favorite duel of all time, and the one duel that I can watch over and over again without getting bored, which is what helps it take the number 2 spot on my list. Now, Seto vs. Yugi 3 may be my favorite duel of all time, but the one duel that I believe that Kaiba performed the best in, and therefore takes the number 1 spot on this list, has to go to his duel against Siegfried in the final season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. Now, the Grand Championship arc was completely pointless, but this is perhaps only one of 2 duels during that arc that I actually thought was extremely good. Kaiba was going up against Siegfried's Valkyrie deck, which was an extremely effective deck, and gave all of us viewers a peek to what the future of the game in the TCG would end up being. And this was actually the point in time where Kaiba was actually about to make his own transition into this style of dueling to begin with. Now, when you take into account that at the point of time in which this duel takes place, this will be Kaiba at his most experienced, and therefore this version of Kaiba is the strongest that he ever gets, and this duel would ultimately end up being Kaiba's last great duel that he would have in the series. Kaiba was able to pull out some extremely effective cards and able to counter some of Siegfried's best moves in a way that Joey never could, showing the difference between a duelist that relies on luck in Joey and a duelist that relies on skill like Kaiba. Kaiba was also brilliant in this duel with his life point management, making plays that from the outside may have looked horrible, but in the grand scheme of things were actually a well thought out and calculated plan to wear down Siegfried's cards until Siegfried had no more moves and was openly exposed to being taken down by the Blue Eyes White Dragons. And with Kaiba emerging victorious with his 3 legendary Blue Eyes White Dragons on the field is the perfect sight to see for a Kaiba victory, which is why to me, this was Kaiba's greatest performance and the number 1 best duel that he ever took part in the anime series.
And that'll do it for my list of what I believe to be Seto Kaiba's top 5 best duels that he took part in the original anime Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Now, if you are a fan of Mr. Kaiba like I am, what are some of your favorite duels that he took part in? Share your lists with me and everyone else in the comments down below, and make sure you stay tuned because the next and third part will be going over the obviously main protagonist of the show, Mr. Yugioh or Yami Yugimoto, depending on who you talk to. So again, if you do happen to enjoy this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and you stay tuned, subscribe, make sure you have those notifications spelled wrong so you can be part of the third part when it finally uploads, not too long from now. So like always, thank you guys for watching, you're awesome, and I'll see you all next time.